Traders, how are you? With Marcello. Today we're doing the recap of what happened in the markets last week, finance, market, business. This week we have a report about Starlink, Elon Musk satellite business, getting just basically almost $7 billion in revenue. AstraZeneca also is taking their jibby jab off of the market because remember, it was safe and effective. And a lot more news. Let's go ahead and get started. Overall, a pretty relaxed week, or not a lot of week, with a lot of economic news overall. The stocks in the United States, all positive. Canada was positive as well. This is due to the fact that everything's kind of humming along. We didn't really have anything that affected, quote unquote, what's going on. Obviously, we still have the wars in Gaza, Israel, Ukraine, Russia, and things are just kind of humming along overall. There is some inflation numbers that came out, some comments from the central bank, and that affected a little bit the thoughts about what could happen in terms of interest rates, and I'll go into depth about that here in just a moment. Stocks in the U.S., as I mentioned, all positive. Canada was positive as well. One of the conspiracy theory news, the jibby jab, I don't know how you say it without getting banned again because they banned one of my channels already, but AstraZeneca is removing the thing in your arm from the pandemic due to the fact that they have admitted that it can cause rare and dangerous side effects. But remember, it's safe and effective. Overseas market news, the European markets mostly higher. The biggest winners there were Paris and also the Euronext. If I'm not mistaken, I believe the Euronext is from Amsterdam. Latin American markets were mixed. The Bovespa, which is the largest market in all of Latin America, Brazil, went down 0.71%, but the biggest loser overall was the Merval in Argentina. Africa and Middle East, mostly mixed. And then in the far, far east, we have mixed markets as well, with the Hang Seng out of Hong Kong being the most positive. Bitcoin and crypto news, not a whole lot of news in the crypto space either, other than the fact that for the week, Bitcoin was down 3.70%. About 60,690 as of Saturday morning when I looked at the number. But for 2024, so far this year, Bitcoin is up over 44%. Now, we have a situation in regards to what's happening with the interest rates, and also, for example, Bitcoin and gold and silver, that consumers or people are starting to see what's happening. They're starting to see I don't know that saying in the United States, the light on the wall. That's probably not it, but people are starting to notice what's really going on in terms of inflation and the dollar and everything. And that's why we're starting to see the increase in a lot of these, let's say, safe haven assets, which Bitcoin is kind of like the digital gold in a way. Commodities, comments from the central bank in the United States is going to indicate higher for longer interest rates. That means it's going to hinder the world's largest crude consumers. Now, there's a situation where, remember that in the majority of the quote-unquote developed world, right, Canada, U.S., all of Europe, or most of Europe, I should say, Japan, Australia, the by far biggest number in the economy is consumer spending, which means you and I just going out and spending money. In the United States, for example, it's almost 70%. In Miami, and all those ladies in Los Angeles, probably close to 100. Germany, it's about 50%. So the interest rate number is extremely important due to the fact that the economy needs people to go out and spend money. Now, what happens is in the year 2000, we had the crisis, right? And that dropped interest rates to the lowest level in the history of the world. Not the history of the United States, not the history of Europe, the literal history of the world. So there was this huge boom that happened right after that because everything can buy everything cheap. And that's why people were buying 2 houses, 3 houses, 4 houses, 2, 3 cars. And that's created a kind of a bubble economy around these lower interest rates. So after, 14 years or so of these super low, less, but you guys get my drift. After so many years with these super low interest rates, now that the interest rates are higher, now people are starting to drown in this debt because now people can't afford things like they did before. So now instead of, for example, buying, 2, 3 houses, you can barely afford 1 house because the interest rates are so high. So that's why this is such a problem. And now that inflation in the United States, which is the preeminent still world empire in the world, everybody still uses the US dollar, even though that's changing. Now there's a situation where people are saying, wait a second, maybe I don't want to hold dollars because inflation is going up and their debt is skyrocketing. And then that's why we see the increase in, for example, Bitcoin and gold and silver. Now for oil this week, there's the word I'm thinking of is attaché, but that's not the right word in English. There's a little bit of a wrinkle in a lot of these products, materia prima, if you want to know. I always do the Spanish videos first, so I think in Spanish when I do these videos in English. The raw materials, that's the word I'm looking for, is priced in dollars around the world. Most things, right? Things are starting to change now, but for the most part, things are still priced in dollars. So with the dollar going up, right, there's a little bit of uncertainty. There's a war in the Middle East and Ukraine. People get worried. People start putting their money where they think it's safe. So the demand for the dollar goes up, and that puts a lot of selling pressure in a lot of these raw materials. Now, oil for the week only went up 0.19%, 78.26. The U.S. consumes a lot of oil, so if they are going to leave the interest rates higher than before, as some comments from the officials from the central bank in the United States have said, that means that the demand for oil probably won't be as high, especially long term, right? Because the economy isn't going to be moving as much, because consumers aren't going to be spending as much money due to the fact that the interest rates are going to be higher for longer. You see how we connect all those dots together? So Brent is the international crude that went down 0.20% to 82.79. And then on the other hand, we also have a situation with a lot of these commodities. Robusta coffee, which is a type of bean that mainly comes from Vietnam, is literally at its highest point in the last 50 years. Remember that the Arabica bean, hopefully I said that right, comes from Brazil and Colombia mostly. So Brazil is the largest producer of coffee in the world, then comes Vietnam, and then comes Colombia, which is number 3. So due to the situation that they've had, bad weather in Vietnam, they are the largest grower of the Robusta beans, which goes into a lot of the instant coffee and also the espresso blends. Now there's a situation where coffee goes up. And one of the things that's really interesting as well is the way that the government manipulates the data to make itself look good is they literally remove information from the calculation. So if we were there's a site that I use, I forgot the name of it, but basically it tells you what the inflation rate would be based on the calculation from the 1980s, because they keep changing it to make it look good, right? So there's an election year, obviously, and those that are in control want things to look good to get reelected, obviously, right? And so if there's high inflation and the economy isn't doing well, that doesn't bode well for the people in power. So they actually removed the number of the coffee from the inflation numbers. And I'm going to give you that number here in just a second. China also is starting to get a good taste for coffee, and that could push prices higher as well. Obviously, with the situation with lower product, right? Lower supply, demand continues to go up, especially with people like India and China, a lot more people moving into the middle class, higher classes as well. Kind of a double whammy when it comes to a lot of these raw materials. Cacao prices rose sharply on Tuesday. Remember that last month they hit a record high, the worst supply shortage in 40 years due to the situation with the virus caused by the insects. I forgot the name of that word in English. The crop disease, essentially, and also the rains in West Africa, which is the majority, 60-70% of all the cacao product. And then copper also briefly traded above 10,000 a ton, and it's up 17% in 2024. Remember the video, for those of you guys that have been following me for a while, especially on the old channel that got banned, 2020 in December, I told you guys these next 10 years are going to be challenging due to the fact that we're going to have social problems, economic problems, and most of all, environmental problems. And notice what's going on with the coffee, the cacao, the copper. It kind of seems like we're just getting hit, from one place to another. China's economy is slowing. A lot more of their citizens are starting to buy gold to hedge against the economic uncertainties. The central bank in China, it's its 18th straight month that they buy gold as well. Gold for the week went up 2.54% to 2,360.70 cents, while silver went up over 6% from 26.61 to 28.23. And remember, I like silver a lot more than gold due to the fact that due to the renewable surge and also the battery surge with the EVs, silver is the most conductive metal in the world. So they're going to be using a lot more of the silver to be able to put the solar panels and also the batteries. right? So the demand is literally exploding while they're not developing new mines. And at some point, the price is just going to explode, especially since it's being manipulated. Financial and banking news, the average credit card debt in the U.S. is now soaring past an average of $6,500 per person. Remember, that affects the consumer spending, and government fakes the inflation data. This is what I was mentioning to you guys before. Coffee was removed from the inflation calculation in April 30th of 2024 due to the fact that coffee prices have surged 78% in September 2023. So they try to tell us that the inflation rate is 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8%. But I'm sure when you guys go to the grocery store, you're probably spending 50% or 100% more than what you used to spend for before. And here comes a Five Guys story. So but during the pandemic, I'd go to Five Guys, good burgers, right? 2 people, 2 burgers, 2 fries, 2 drinks, $20 for both of us. I just went to Five Guys about 3 or 4 months ago, and it's $25 just for one person. And that's just the burger, no fries. Unbelievable. Now, there's 2 specific reasons why they manipulate this data, and it's due to the fact that they have a political component and also a financial component. Obviously, as I mentioned, if the inflation is really bad and the economy doesn't seem like it's doing well, the people in power aren't going to be reelected because they need to perceive that things are going well, which obviously right now they're not. That's why they're changing even more the inflation data. And on top of that, the actual cost of living, which is based on the inflation. Remember that there's veterans and there's people that are retired that are living off of Social Security, which is basically a government pension. So the increased amount of those pensions isn't going to be as higher, reducing the cost on the government because the inflation isn't actual what it is. Do you see how it works? Travelers insurance is hiking a lot of people's property insurance by 15% in California. There's thousands of people also that are being simply kicked out of being covered. 320,000 people have policies in California. In addition to that, they're the 6th largest property insurer in 2022. Remember, I told you guys, I think part of the reason why a lot of these insurance companies are getting rid of a lot of these policies or skyrocketing costs is because they know what's coming. And I think there's going to be some kind of earthquake or something in the next few years, 1 to 3 years or so in California. Remember, I told you that. And it's not magic, right? It's not witchcraft or anything, but you can kind of see what's happening in the world. In January 1st of this year, remember, we had that massive Tokyo earthquake, and it's just literally coming around the ring of fire, right? It comes down through the Philippines, Indonesia, the Guatemala and Mexico on the border just had a huge earthquake recently, so it's kind of just starting to come right back up, and eventually I think it's going to hit California. Sweden's central bank is going to cut interest rates for the first time in 8 years on Wednesday. As you can see, the difference in the interest rate policy between the United States and Europe. It expects 2 more cuts that could be expected in the second half of this year. Not a whole lot of political news, and in economic news, the U.S. consumer sentiment, remember consumer spending, fell sharply in May. It's its lowest level in 6 months. Americans cited stubbornly high inflation and interest rates in addition to the unemployment fears about that it's going to rise. And remember, a lot of companies, for example, Tyson, letting go a lot of people, and they said that they want to hire the illegal immigrants that are coming in. So companies are lowering their costs by hiring the illegals, but then citizens and residents of the U.S., legal residents, are out of jobs more and more. Google, for example, said that they're laying off a ton of people as well and moving the jobs, for example, to Mexico, again, reducing their costs. Corporate news, Tyson Foods warns that low-income consumers are starting to crack under the inflation storm. The McDonald's also, there was something I saw on X recently where it was like $20 for a Big Mac now. It's just unbelievable. Shopify went down 18% after they had disappointing revenue and profit guidance for coming up. They had a $273 million loss last quarter. And Toyota, which on any given month or day, it's the largest or the second largest producer of vehicles in the world, said that their operating profit expected to be 20% lower than the previous fiscal year. So you can see we're starting to see that the economy is starting to crack, especially when it comes to consumers, because they're not spending as much money anymore. Disney and Warner Brothers and Discovery, all three are teaming up to offer a one bundle streaming service. It's going to offer Disney Plus, Hulu Max at one price this summer. Keep paying for those communists that are destroying our economy. And technology, Elon Musk's Starlink is in hyper growth. surprising analysts with a report that they're going to make $6.6 billion so far in 2024. In 2022, they were at $1.4 billion. And there was a tweet, I don't know how you say an X from Elon Musk, a tweet that said that they're basically cash flow positive now. In 2019, they had 60 Starlink satellites. Well, now they have 6,000 satellites, 5,200 operational, and nearly 3 million terminals across 75 countries. Absolutely staggering. And if you look at the two largest geostationary satellite operators, which is SES and Intelsat, they combined their revenues at $4.1 billion, which kind of shows you what Elon Musk is doing with Starlink. Not a lot of trade news and investment news, but in the interesting facts, there was a severe solar storm that supercharged a lot of the aurora borealis on Friday. It could be seen as low as Alabama, Northern California, London, for example. There was a beautiful sky that was lit. Not a good thing, however. There was something called the Carrington event, which, if I'm not mistaken, it was in 1818 that literally fried our entire electrical system. So if we get a storm from the sun, like this one that was really strong, that was as strong as the one that we had during the Carrington event, that means that our entire electrical grid would be fried. All your cars, which are all computer-based and electrical, all would be fried. That's why I love classic cars. They have some electricity, but you can pop the clutch and turn it on, for example. And in addition to that, 3 women that made claims against Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate have dropped their claims, in case you're in the social media or social news business. That's the news for this week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to subscribe, and remember, the preppers were right.